Hi, my name is Riley Graves, and I'm 30 years old. I found out my sister was getting married because a stranger tagged me in her photos. It was exactly 6:43 in the morning, and my boots were still damp from a classified site recon I'd just completed in northern Vermont. I'd barely stepped into my apartment in Hartford, Connecticut, still wearing half of my field gear, when I dropped my encrypted duffel bag onto the hardwood floor and powered on my personal tablet, something I rarely do. I wasn't expecting anything. No one from my old life ever messaged me there. That's probably why the algorithm thought it would be a good idea to show me a photo of my sister, dressed in a lace wedding gown, twirling under a canopy of lights next to some man I'd never seen before. The photo was tagged, Hannah Graves and Daniel Avery. Underneath it read, "She said yes." I just stared. My fingers hovered over the caption. I scrolled further. There was a picture of the ring, a posed group shot on a hilltop vineyard, and more smiles than I'd seen from her in years. Hannah's face was glowing. Mine wasn't in any of the photos. Of course not. I hadn't even known she was engaged. A bitter laugh came out before I could stop it. I wasn't shocked. I was just stung. The kind of sting you feel when an old scar burns like it's brand new again. I let my thumb hover over the comments. My mom had left a trail of heart emojis. My dad had reposted the image with one of his long captions about family, legacy, and joy. The same family that hadn't texted, called, or even emailed me. Not a single word, not even a courtesy message. I hadn't spoken to Hannah in over a year. The last time I reached out was on her birthday.
She didn't respond.
Since then, she'd been slowly slipping away from my life, like an old photo on a dimming screen that never fully vanishes, but never comes back into focus either. But this wasn't just silence. This was erasure. I set the tablet face down on the counter and went to wash my hands. Habit. Dust. Oil. Traces of the last 36 hours spent kneeling in military-grade mud and machinery. I caught my reflection in the mirror. No makeup, hair pulled tight into a braid, fatigue etched into every line of my face. I looked like a soldier, not a sister. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I dried my hands, opened the door, and saw a courier already walking away. On the floor was a thin white envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, cream stock with a silver lining. My heart skipped, then sank. The envelope was addressed to the Graves family. Not Riley. Not Ms. Riley Graves. Just the family. Inside was an invitation printed in embossed script. Hannah and Daniel cordially invite you to their wedding celebration at Willow Ridge Estate, Catskill Hills, New York. November 4th, 2023. That was it. No personal note. No RSVP card. Just a QR code to scan if you plan to attend. I stared at it for a long time. It felt like someone had added my name at the last minute, just to fill a guest list. Or worse, because someone asked, "Whatever happened to Riley?" I wouldn't put it past them. The tablet buzzed. A text. It was from my mother. "If you come, please wear beige or gray. Nothing too loud." That was it. No, "Glad you received the invite." No, "We'd love to see you." Just a dress code reminder, as if I were an unpredictable guest at a party I didn't belong to. I leaned against the kitchen island. The early morning light filtered through the blinds in soft, sleepy stripes. Outside, birds chirped, and a delivery truck rumbled down the street, but inside, the silence was almost crushing. I opened the fridge and pulled out the last bottle of elderflower tonic I'd brought home from a recon op. I poured a glass. It tasted like cold bitterness. Like forgetting. The tablet buzzed again. This time it was a voice call. "Riley," the screen read. It was Tasha, an old friend from the academy who now worked for a private intel firm in Washington, D.C. Her voice cracked with static. "You saw it. The photos," I said flatly.
Yeah.
A pause. "You okay?" I didn't answer.
She knew not to push.
"You're not going, right?" she asked after a beat. I looked at the invitation still resting on the counter. "I don't know," I said. "I think I have to."
Why?
"Because they erased me," I said. "And now they're throwing a celebration without even checking if I'm still alive." I ended the call. Later that morning, I sat on the edge of my bed, the duffel still half-packed beside me. I picked up the invitation again and held it over the trash can. My fingers hesitated. My mother's voice echoed in my head, icy and dismissive. Don't come unless you're ready to behave like a guest, not a disruption. I let out a slow breath. Then, without knowing why, I folded the invite and slid it into the front pocket of my duffel. I didn't owe them anything. Not my presence, not my forgiveness. But maybe I owed myself something. The secure band on my wrist pulsed, a subtle vibration. I tapped it twice. A small encrypted screen lit up with a single line of text. If you still care about Hannah, show up. Someone else already has. I arrived early. No one noticed. The drive from Hartford to Willow Ridge Estate took just over 4 hours. I left before dawn, the rental car humming beneath me with Maryland plates and a duffel bag slung in the back seat. The road unspooled like a ribbon through misty hills and blood-red trees, winding into the heart of the Catskill Hills, trying too hard to be beautiful. But beauty didn't matter, not when your nerves were this tight. I didn't relax until the tires crunched into the gravel loop outside the estate's gate. Of course, it was exactly the kind of place my mother would pick. Elegant, but not gaudy. Expensive in the quiet way only old money understands. Stone pillars wrapped in ivy, golden trees perfectly positioned for aesthetic appeal, and staff in pressed black vests greeting guests like trained actors. I stayed in the car longer than I needed to, watching women in muted cocktail dresses laugh beside clean-cut men with tailored suits and manicured confidence. Name tags already pinned, roles rehearsed. Everyone knew who they were. I didn't. Eventually, I stepped out and entered through the side vestibule, where the check-in table stood beneath a chandelier so grand it could have lit a museum. 2 women in ballet flats and earpieces were typing furiously behind silver iPads, their smiles perfectly calibrated. A sign above them read, Graves, Avery Wedding. Welcome guests. I approached slowly, every step calculated. Name? One of them asked without looking up. Riley Graves. She paused, scrolled, then scrolled again. Her fingers hesitated. I don't see a Riley Graves, she said, glancing sideways at her partner. Are you with the Avery family? I shook my head once. I'm the bride's sister. A few seconds passed before something flickered behind her eyes. Maybe recognition, maybe guilt. She typed faster. Please wait 1 moment. Within seconds, a supervisor appeared. She didn't ask for details. She didn't apologize. She just offered a rehearsed smile and gestured politely toward the far wing of the estate. This way, Ms. Graves. We've arranged a place for you. That place turned out to be overflow seating. The ballroom hadn't opened yet, but the vestibule outside was already buzzing with guests sipping champagne, admiring the floral walls filled with framed family photos. Not one of those photos included me. The staffer led me to a small alcove lined with neutral chairs. My seat was near the exit, far enough that I wouldn't be in any photos, close enough to hear the music. The only face I recognized was a distant aunt I hadn't seen since I was 12. They had planned this. I sat down, adjusted the hem of my slate-gray jacket, subdued, as instructed, and opened the slim program I'd been handed. It listed the order of events, a few generic notes about love and legacy, and then pages of curated information about the happy couple. It read like the political profile, full of achievements and milestones. I didn't belong here, and they wanted me to feel it. My mother entered 15 minutes later, flanked by 2 women from her bridge club. Her cream outfit matched the decor. Pearls around her neck. Hair sculpted into a French twist. She walked past rows of guests until her eyes landed on me. Her expression softened, not into warmth, but calculation. A smile tugged at her mouth. Not kindness. Approval. You came, she said, approaching me. I did. You look, she glanced over my outfit. Thank you for dressing appropriately. There was no hug. Just an appraisal, like I was a risk she needed to assess. One photo she didn't want to explain. My father entered soon after, laughing with one of the groomsmen. He caught sight of me mid-sentence, paused just long enough to nod, then kept walking. Like I was a decorative item, not a daughter. I kept my eyes on the room. People flowed in, holding glasses and laughing too loudly. A few glanced my way, then quickly away. No one wanted to be the one to talk to the sister, who'd been redacted. Then she appeared.
Hannah.
She swept into the room like the wind, all ivory silk and soft makeup. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a bridal catalog. Radiant. Weightless. She passed by my row without breaking stride, laughing at something one of her bridesmaids had said. Her eyes scanned the space, stopped near me, but didn't linger. No greeting. No acknowledgement. Nothing. It was like I didn't exist. I folded the program in my lap, pressing the edge into my thumb, just to feel something sharp. In the distance, the front rows glittered with gilded chairs. I knew where hers would be, centered, spotlit. Mine creaked under me, pushed into a corner behind the emergency exit. A line from my father echoed in my mind. I remembered him once saying at a donor dinner, "Family isn't about feelings, it's about appearances." He hadn't been speaking to me. He never was. The music shifted as the officiant stepped onto the platform. Applause rippled politely across the rows. I clapped twice, then stopped. My hands rested still in my lap. As the guests leaned forward in their seats, I didn't. I scanned the crowd. Near the center of the room, a man in a gray suit leaned slightly forward, one elbow on his knee. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. Our eyes met for a second, no more. In that fraction of a moment I saw it, recognition, like he'd just seen a ghost. Then he blinked and looked away, gone into the crowd. The enemy doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes they carry hors d'oeuvres. A waiter walked past me with a tray of crackers topped with soft cheese and pear. His movements were smooth.
Polished.
Normal. Too normal. Black uniform, like the others. White gloves. Polished shoes. But his left sleeve, creased wrong. Barely noticeable. The name on his waist badge didn't match any I'd overheard at check-in. Most people wouldn't notice. But I wasn't most people. The cocktail reception had barely started, but something felt off. The laughter was too clean. The decor too symmetrical. Even the string quartet's rhythm felt orchestrated for effect. And then the lighting rig above the stage blinked. Once, twice, then steadied. That wasn't ambience. That was a signal. I scanned the room again, perimeter, ceilings, exits. That's when I saw him, leaning against a marble column near the bar. Thomas Lane. Hair darker than I remembered. Suit perfect. Tie casually loose. A lowball glass in one hand. He wasn't drinking. We locked eyes for a second. Then he turned away just as another server walked between us. I followed him, slowly, near the fireplace. He picked up a fig from the charcuterie board. Without looking at me, he said, "Still you under that braid, huh?" I didn't answer. He took a bite, chewed once. Cross signals all over. AV stack's been tampered with. By who? Someone fluent. Dummy cables rerouting audio. Endpoints aren't local. I felt the focus shift inside me, like muscle memory kicking in. You saw who installed it? Not yet. He turned finally. But you're going to. I didn't blink. I just reached into my clutch and pulled the scanner. I moved slowly through the crowd, keeping my steps even, casual. I timed them with the rhythm of the room, the chatter, the music, the clink of glassware. I didn't need anyone looking at me twice. I approached the portable mic stand beside the stage. A tall tech guy in a gray polo was bent over it, fiddling with sound levels. Just before I reached him, a server handed him a USB drive, then disappeared down a hallway leading toward the kitchens. I didn't break stride. At the base of the mic stand, I pressed my thumb along the side seam of my clutch. A silent click. The flap slid open to reveal the matte black scanner, small enough to pass for lipstick. I held it low, aimed, and tapped twice. A pulse of light swept over the components. The device in my hand vibrated.
Red.
Not hotel-grade tech. The signal was bouncing off frequencies I hadn't seen since the Cyprus operation. I read the encryption signature. Someone wanted this to look like Department of Defense hardware. It wasn't. They were trying to fake official signal formatting, just enough to avoid trace detection. Which meant this wasn't just spying. This was misdirection. I slipped the scanner back into my clutch and turned. Thomas reappeared beside me, quiet as ever. "They're not transmitting," he said, watching the server across the room. "They're receiving." I frowned. "What's the message?" He pulled his phone from his jacket and angled the screen toward me. The feed displayed a loop of coded symbols, a timer counting down, lines of encrypted text overlaid on a black background. "Intercepted 10 minutes ago," he said. I studied it. Then my pulse slowed, not out of fear, but memory. 3 letters stood out. "Mr.
Reed," I said.
Thomas nodded. "He wants confirmation before 1,600 hours. Marcus Reed." I hadn't heard his name in 4 years. Not since Black Horizon. Not since he walked out of a secure debriefing room and left me locked inside, stripped of rank, reputation, and record. If Reed was here or even watching from afar, it wasn't by accident. He never showed up unless he was orchestrating something. That meant the wedding wasn't the operation. It was the cover. I glanced around. Suddenly, every champagne flute could hide a microphone. Every centerpiece a camera. Every server a handler. "This isn't about Hannah," I said quietly. "It never was." Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box, unmarked, elegant. He pressed it into my palm. "Temporary authority reinstated," he said softly. "Your call, Major Graves." The bridal suite was quiet. Too quiet. Flickering candles lined the walls in silver sconces, filling the space with the scent of rosewood and vanilla. Fabric rustled near the mirror, but otherwise, the silence pressed against me like a wall. I closed the door behind me without knocking. Hannah stood in front of a full-length mirror, one shoulder bare as she adjusted the strap of her wedding gown. Layers of silk floated around her like clouds. She looked calm from behind, but her hands were trembling. Her eyes caught mine in the mirror.
Surprise.
Then suspicion. "You're not supposed to be in here," she said, turning toward me. "And you weren't supposed to broadcast secure intel through your dress," I replied. Her expression twisted, confusion, disbelief, then something darker.
Fear.
I stepped forward. "Where is it?" "I don't know what you're talking about."
"Don't," I said.
My voice was flat. I already traced the signal. She hesitated. And in that pause, she wasn't a bride anymore. She was my sister again. Just a girl caught in something she didn't understand. "You think I did this on purpose?" she asked. "I think you've been used." She looked down. "A donor from Daniel's firm gave us a sponsorship package," she said. "Said the gown was custom. Exclusive. I thought it was a gift." "Who arranged it?"
She paused.
"I don't know. I didn't ask questions." "Of course you didn't," I said, not unkindly. "Let me see the hem." No, her hands flew to the gown. "This is my wedding, Riley. I don't care what agency you think you're still working for. I'm not here as an agent."
"Exactly," she snapped.
"You're not anything anymore." That one landed, but I didn't respond. I waited. Eventually, her voice dropped to a whisper. "There's something wrong with it, isn't there?" "Yes." She slowly lifted the train of her dress. I knelt down and pulled the layers of silk aside, careful not to tear the fabric. Near the inner lining, behind a hidden fold in the stitching, I found it. A tiny silver transmitter. No larger than a thumbtack. My scanner vibrated in my clutch. The signal was active. The device was alive. Military grade. Designed to move with fabric. Invisible. Dangerous. I pulled it out and held it up to the light. It looked like jewelry. It wasn't. Hannah collapsed onto a velvet bench and buried her face in her hands. "I didn't tell you because I thought you'd ruin everything," she said, voice shaking. I stood slowly, the transmitter between my fingers like a dark gem. "No, Hannah," I said. "I'm here to save it. Again." No one stood for me until one man did. The music swelled as the double doors opened. Guests turned in their chairs, breath caught in that ceremonial pause that always comes before the bride walks in. I stayed seated in the back row, my spine pressed against the cold edge of the seat, hidden behind the last floral column near the exit. Candlelight flickered along polished marble floors. The air shimmered with reverence and subtle vanity, phones half hidden, lenses tilted just so, smiles shaped more for the camera than for each other. Hannah entered on our father's arm. Her dress billowed behind her, clean now of the device we had just extracted. Radiant, untouched, perfect, like the illusion required.
She didn't look at me.
Neither did he. My mother, seated a few rows ahead, stood with pride as they passed. Her face held that perfect expression, composed joy layered with subtle triumph. Guests followed her lead, standing politely, clapping softly. I stayed seated. From where I sat, I could see everything. The tight set of our father's jaw, the practiced smile on Hannah's lips, the way champagne flutes hovered midair as if the toasts had already begun in their minds. And then I saw him. Marcus Reed.
Second row, center right.
He wasn't hiding. He didn't have to. His hair was shorter than I remembered, now dusted with gray. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes weren't. They were scanning, waiting. I didn't move.
He didn't look directly at me.
He didn't need to. He already knew I'd seen him. Then the officiant stepped to the podium. His voice was warm, measured, and practiced. Before we begin this union, he said, we'd like to take a moment to recognize those who've served. If there are any veterans in the room who wish to stand in honor of the ceremony, you may do so now. Silence. And then, from 3 rows ahead, a man rose. Thomas. His suit was civilian but sharp. His movements deliberate. He turned, slowly, until his eyes locked with mine. Then, with a crispness that felt like history folding itself into the present, he lifted his hand into a full military salute. Major Riley Graves, ma'am, he said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. His voice cut through the air like a signal. My breath caught, not because I was surprised, but because of the weight it carried. The stillness afterward was louder than applause. Heads turned. Guests whispered. Some gasped. Phones lowered. The officiant blinked mid-sentence. My mother's smile shattered like glass. My father looked like he'd been slapped. And Hannah, she looked at me. Not past me.
At me.
Really looked. I rose, not slowly, not cautiously. I stood because there was no one left to silence me. My boots struck the marble like punctuation. Reed's eyes finally found mine. His expression didn't change. But I saw it in the tightening of his jaw, the recognition that this wasn't going according to plan. This isn't over, Marcus, I said silently. It's just begun. They had buried my name in redacted lines and silenced reports. But I had come back with a pen sharper than any blade, and the truth, no longer quiet. The private lounge behind the ceremony hall was dim and still, lit only by the afternoon sun filtering through tall curtained windows. The walls were lined with sepia portraits of people I'd never met, ancestors posed stiffly in suits and lace, staring like they knew secrets but wouldn't speak them aloud. I sat in a leather chair, quiet, my hands resting on the small velvet box Thomas had given me earlier. It sat unopened beside a half-full glass of untouched champagne. The air smelled of old wood, expensive cologne, and something metallic beneath it all, like the weight of memory and pipework. I stared at the box. Then, finally, I flipped it open. Inside was the real thing. The metal. Crimson at the edges, silver bursting out in a star-like geometry. Not the replica they'd once offered me as a consolation prize. Not the press photo version. This was the actual medal I'd earned and never received. Syria. 2016. I was 28. 3 months into field command. The storm had hit faster than we predicted. Visibility near zero, comms static choked, multiple friendlies pinned under broken walls and steel debris. The quadrant was supposed to be clear. Our intel said so. But it wasn't. Thomas had taken shrapnel in the thigh. 2 others were buried in rubble, lungs filling with dust. Reed, back at base, was commanding from a lagging ops feed. He'd ordered us to hold perimeter. Wait for secondary drone sweep. He barked into my earpiece. We don't have time for clearance, I'd snapped. We're burning daylight and blood. He repeated the order. I cut the feed. I led my team in myself. 12 minutes. 5 of those dragging Thomas through a crater that didn't exist an hour earlier. We made it out.
Barely.
48 hours later, I read the report. It blamed reckless field improvisation. My name. My decision. Reed's name wasn't even in the document. He got promoted 3 weeks later. I got buried in silence. They offered me 2 options: take the fall quietly or face tribunal for insubordination under fire. I signed the NDA and disappeared. They'd said the original medal had been lost in logistics.
They lied.
Now, 6 years later, it sat in front of me, polished, real, unforgiven. A knock came at the door. Thomas stepped in.
He didn't speak.
He just handed me a phone. A black screen lit up with cascading code, metadata from the transmitter we pulled out of Hannah's gown. I scanned the feed. Hex keys. Packet logs. Timestamps. Destination markers. Then I saw it. A file. Vanguard_backup. exe. Scheduled for deletion. 2200 hours Eastern Standard Time. Final node, Red House. I froze. Red House was one of the last secure archives, the kind you bury when you don't want a record but can't risk destruction. And now someone was preparing to burn it. Someone with Reed's clearance signature. The last 3 digits of the sender's ID were unmistakable. MR09. He wasn't just watching this wedding.
He was using it.
Reed was triggering a final purge of everything related to Vanguard. Every file, every op, every piece of truth from Black Horizon and beyond. I stood too fast. My vision narrowed. If that archive was erased tonight, my story wouldn't just be gone, it would never have existed. Everything he'd done would become the official record. Everything I did forgotten. A whisper echoed from the hallway. A man's voice, low, deliberate. You're not the only ghost at this wedding. Not all toasts are harmless. The garden terrace behind Willow Ridge Estate glowed beneath delicate webs of string lights, strung like veins of fireflies between the trees. Jazz music drifted from speakers hidden among the hedges, calm and smooth, meant to soothe, to distract. Guests laughed near candlelit tables, sipping from long-stemmed glasses. A wedding planner in heels paced quietly in the background, double-checking notes on her clipboard for the 5th time. Thomas stood near a trellis, drink in hand, posture easy. But I knew better. His eyes scanned every corner. Mine did too. A single microphone stood at the head of the long outdoor table. It was now positioned differently than during the ceremony, moved closer, wired anew. Neater. Too neat. Beside it, a single red rose had been placed. Aesthetic detail, or a marker. My scanner hummed faintly inside my clutch. The mix components were standard. But buried deep inside, hidden beneath default signal masking, was a pulse. A transmitter. Emily stood under the arbor now, her glass lifted in one hand, veil removed. Her new husband, Daniel, stood beside her, smiling the kind of smile that fit a man who thought he'd already won. I just want to say, she began. Her voice floated effortlessly into the mic. That love, real love, sneaks up on you. It anchors itself where you least expect it. The guests clinked glasses. Polite laughter followed. But I wasn't listening anymore. Because just then my scanner buzzed. Sharp.
Quick.
A packet had been sent. A narrowband burst, compressed and buried under the wedding audio stream. I tapped the interface. The data wasn't just a one-time transmission. It was a loop. I glanced at Thomas, who was already moving toward me. That was it, he muttered. That's what I was afraid of. I parsed the incoming feed, breaking apart the layers, isolating tags. Someone was feeding an altered version of the Vanguard records, twisted opcodes, false timestamps, and rewritten directives. One line stood out like wrought in fresh paint. Directive 19A, Officer RG, unauthorized engagement, failure to confirm secondary evac protocol, override of chain of command. Result, civilian exposure. Jesus. They're rewriting the mission, I said. In real time. Thomas's voice dropped. Where did the signal land? Final node bounces through proxies, I replied, scrolling fast. Ends at a policy shell. A pack registered under. I stopped. The ARC initiative. His jaw tightened. Grayson. That name sat like ice on my tongue. Senator Jonathan Grayson. Defense Oversight Committee. Legacy hawk. Old world patriot. And Reed's longtime handler. This wasn't just about hiding truth. It was about rewriting history. Grayson wanted my record burned and Reed's enshrined. The jazz tempo shifted. Lighter. Louder. Emily stood laughing with her bridesmaids again. Her champagne glass nearly empty. She looked happy, too happy. Or just well-rehearsed. I stared at the mic again. It looked like any wedding mic, harmless. Decorative. But it had just fired the bullet that would rewrite my name in ash. Footsteps behind me.
Slow.
Familiar. I turned. Emily. Her eyes were tired now. The smile gone. Her voice came soft. Why are you snooping around at my wedding? I looked at her, really looked, and said, some secrets are stitched in. Others are sewn shut. We stood in silence. Neither of us blinked. The bridal dressing room was dim, the last bit of hallway light slipping under the door like a quiet warning. Candles had long since burned out. The vanity was cluttered with makeup brushes and perfume bottles, discarded like armor after a lost battle. Hannah's wedding gown hung on a wooden mannequin in the corner, still beautiful, but slack now, like something that had exhaled. I closed the door behind me with a soft click and walked toward the mannequin. The gown loomed like a ghost. I pulled gloves from my blazer pocket and slipped them on. Then I knelt at the base of the dress, studying the fabric for signs, not damage, but disruption. Not beauty, but deception. Every inch had been crafted with intention. But it was the flaws I was looking for. The seam near the hip pulled tighter than it should. The inner lace was too flat in places, too smooth in others. I pulled out a scalpel from my clutch. A quick, clean slice along the lining.
There.
Behind a second layer of silk, nestled in a muslin fold that would only move when the bride walked, was a small, flat packet. Smooth. Casing sealed. No logo. Just 3 tiny rivets and a soft residual hum that confirmed it was still live. NATO grade. Movement trace. Heat mapping. Passive relay. This wasn't surveillance. It was harvesting. Everything Hannah did, every word, every step, had been broadcast. And the wedding microphone hadn't just passed a single transmission. It had looped it. Spread it. I connected my decryptor to the packet, a thin cable running from the scanner in my clutch. A soft green light blinked. Then red. Then green again. Decryption initiated. Lines of data streamed across the interface. Source logs, metadata, signature keys. Obfuscation layers peeled back, revealing the truth in fragments. And there it was. A string of digital hex. MRC04 FGR. Reed hadn't just reused an old op. He had signed it. This was his operation. It was live. It was personal. And he'd sewn it into my sister's wedding like a weapon made of silk. Behind me, I heard the faintest breath. I turned, still kneeling. Hannah stood in the doorway, her eyes wide, her lipstick faded, her expression caught somewhere between fury and betrayal. "What are you doing?" she said. Her voice cracked. "Finishing what someone else started," I replied, rising slowly. "You're cutting apart my wedding dress." It was never just a dress. She stepped closer, face flushed. "You always do this. You always ruin things. You walk in with your secrets and your suspicion like I'm some idiot who needs saving." I didn't respond. She kept going. "Just once," she snapped. "I wanted something that wasn't about you, your job, your war, your guilt." "This isn't guilt," I said. She faltered. I held up the transmitter. "You didn't plant this. They did. They used you." Her eyes dropped to the object in my hand. She stumbled back a step, hitting the edge of the vanity. "They used me," she whispered, "because they knew I'd show up." Her legs gave out slightly, and she sat down on the velvet bench. "I felt it," she said. "Wearing that thing, I felt watched. I told Daniel something was off. He said I was just stressed. You were right. Silence. Then, so, what happens now? I watched the last line of code finalize on my decryptor. A countdown appeared. Another data transfer was coming.
Soon.
I pressed my earpiece. Thomas, do you read? A faint buzz. Copy. This confirms it. Reed's working with Grayson. The real data, they're moving it tonight. Outside, the ballroom was already shifting again. Another speech was starting. Another performance underway. The betrayal wasn't over.
Not yet.
The ballroom shimmered with carefully curated elegance, candlelight bouncing from crystal, every chair straight, every plate gleaming. The scent of sugared roses filled the air, warm and heavy. Laughter rolled like a tide through the crowd, and at the center of it all stood Marcus Reed, holding a champagne glass aloft, voice smooth as silk. I want to propose a toast, he said. Not just to the happy couple, though they deserve all the joy in the world, but to the people who raised them, the Graves family. A name that represents loyalty, honor, and quiet strength. Polite applause. My mother dabbed her eyes. My father nodded like a statesman receiving applause. Hannah looked down, unsure. And finally, Reed continued, gaze sweeping the room, to those who serve without recognition, guardians in the shadows. May we someday be worthy of their silence. That was the line. It landed like poetry. But I knew better. I was already moving. 30 seconds earlier, Thomas had hijacked the AV feed. All I had to do now was press the trigger. I reached into my clutch and tapped the transmitter once. The ballroom lights dimmed. Guests murmured. A few gasped. The slideshow of smiling wedding photos blinked out. The screen turned black. Then white code flickered across it. A signature appeared. Vanguard_backup.exe. Origin, Red House. Signer, MRC, 04FGR. People shifted in their seats. The audio clicked on. My voice echoed through the ballroom. They're moving the real data tonight. Silence. Reed lowered his glass. What is this? He said, eyes scanning. This isn't part of the schedule. Someone's hacked the system. His expression was perfect.
Shock.
Confusion.
Concern.
This is classified content, he said urgently. Please, everyone, this could be dangerous. Like hell it is, I said aloud, stepping out from the back shadows. Heads turned. I'm not the danger. He is. A dozen phones rose. Cameras focused. Questions swirled like smoke. They buried what happened. They buried me. And now they're using this wedding to rewrite history. Reed didn't blink. Instead, he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a slim black folder. I'm sorry, he said solemnly, handing it to venue security. This is exactly what we feared. She accessed classified data through an unauthorized channel. Security stepped forward. He was trying to flip the narrative in real time. But he was too late. The footage had already begun. The screen now showed a battlefield, grainy gray-blue video. Night vision. Screams. My voice over comms. Team Alpha, move now, civilian priority. Then the dust. The fire. The evac chopper. A boy in my arms, no older than 7, limp and soot-covered. My voice again. We don't wait for clearance. We move.
Now.
The guests froze. Hannah stood at the edge of the stage, unmoving. My mother's hand was clamped over her mouth. My father clung to the back of a chair. And Reed, for the first time that night, his expression cracked. Senator Grayson rose from his chair like a man rising from a shipwreck. This footage, he said carefully, is disturbing, but let's not jump to conclusions. In today's world, anything can be fabricated. I didn't blink. You know, Senator. You sealed the records last quarter. His ears reddened. You're dismissing every soldier who didn't come back, I said. Every child almost killed by a delay order. Every truth you tried to bury. From the back, another man stood. Tuxedo. Press badge. A phone in his hand, live stream running. Director Riley Graves, he said. We served together in Anara. That's me, right there, 10 seconds from the right, behind the evac line. He pointed to the screen. She saved us. Reed's orders almost got us all killed. The room exploded. Not in noise, yet, but in energy. A shift. Phones raised. Guests gasped. And then Reed lunged for the projector. The USB was still glowing in its port. But Thomas was there first. He stepped in, slow and cold, blocking Reed's path. "Sit down, sir." His jacket parted just enough to reveal the holstered weapon. Reed froze. Cameras clicked. He had once buried my name. Tonight, the earth cracked open beneath his. The private security wing behind the ballroom was cold, metal-lined, sterile. Reed sat slouched in a chair, his eyes calculating, mouth tight. Grayson stood nearby, silent, phone clutched in hand but useless now. "This is a witch hunt," Reed said. "She's unstable. Always has been. She freelanced field ops. This isn't truth, it's ego." I opened a laptop. One of 3 I'd stored offline for this moment. "Log 47B, I said. Timestamp 7 minutes before the breach. I pressed play. Reed's voice crackled from the speaker. "Let the team hold. If there's fallout, she'll take it. No sense burning the whole command structure." A second voice. "But that's a civilian zone." Reed again. "She signed the override. Let her wear the heat." Grayson turned pale. "I didn't authorize," he began. "You didn't stop it either." Sirens sounded faintly outside. Security had locked down the estate. Then came the knock. 2 agents entered. No insignia. Just intent. One of them read aloud. "Marcus Reed, you are under federal investigation for obstruction of justice and falsification of defense intelligence." They cuffed him.
He didn't speak.
But behind them, in the doorway, my father stood. He didn't say anything either. Just watched them lead Reed away. And this time, he didn't look through me. He looked at me. The ballroom was nearly empty now. Outside, dusk covered the gardens in long shadows. The photographer approached Hannah. "Do you want just the immediate family?" Hannah didn't hesitate. "She's in this one," she said, looking straight at me. It wasn't for show. I stepped in. The flash went off. No fanfare. No tears. Just 4 people finally standing where they should have stood years ago. Hannah leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for not letting me marry into a lie." I nodded. I'd stormed safe houses. But this dinner scared me more. The Graves family kitchen hadn't changed. Cinnamon rolls cooling on the counter. The faucet still dripped once every few seconds. I sat at the old corner seat, the one I always took as a teenager. Only this time, I hadn't chosen it. Hannah had pulled out the chair and waited for me to sit. Thomas sat beside me, sleeves rolled, fingers wrapped around his coffee like it was something steady. Across the table, my mother poured a cup for me, already creamed, just like I used to take it.
She didn't speak.
But she placed it down gently. My father buttered toast. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked toward me. We spoke about the weather. The DJ who left mid-wedding. We laughed. Awkward, but honest. Then the front door opened. Tiny footsteps tapped against the floor, and a girl, maybe 7, peeked around the corner. Blonde braids, navy ribbons sliding off her shoulder. "Hi," she said. "I'm Jenna." Hannah stood. "This is Daniel's niece. She stayed with us last night." Jenna held something in her hand. A small white daisy pin, stitched with little pearls. "My dad said you're the reason he came home," she said. I didn't speak. I took the daisy, pinned it to my lapel. "Then your dad's a good man," I said. She grinned and skipped away, her ribbon trailing behind her like a comet. My mother handed me a warm cinnamon roll. No words, but her eyes were steady. I held my coffee with both hands. It didn't shake. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain why I was at the table. I was just there.
And it was enough.
Later that morning, under the marble rotunda of the Memorial Hall, I stood behind a podium. A flag hung at half-mast. Rows of veterans and civilians filled the seats. I pressed my palms to the wood and began. "I never needed my name in the record," I said. "I needed the people I saved to live." I paused. For years, I stayed in the dark. I thought I was protecting people. But silence didn't just guard secrets. It protected lies. Behind me, a bronze seal had just been mounted. Operation Vanguard, Black Horizon Division. Confirmed and archived. 2023. People rose from their seats. Thomas.
Moth.
Jenna. Others from my past. One soldier stood, saluted, and said words I hadn't heard in years. Welcome home, Director. Others joined, row by row. No trumpets. No banners. Just the sound of hands finding each other in quiet applause. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition. I stepped down and passed the wall of names. Mine was near the center now, etched in metal, not ink. And beneath it one final line. Sometimes silence saves lives. But truth saves nations.